Hello and welcome to another episode of Energy Unwrapped podcast with me, Mick Wall. In this episode, I'm joined by Alex Nelson, co-founder of Havenwise, the smart heat pump controller, where we talk about how Havenwise started, why manufacturer controls don't always make the best decisions, how Havenwise learns your home and your heat pump, using time of use tariffs to cut running costs, who Havenwise is for and who it probably isn't, using time of use tariffs to cut running costs, and who Havenwise is for and who it probably isn't. This episode is sponsored by my own website, Energy Stats UK, where you can find energy pricing data, blogs about my renewable journey, including the holy trinity of solar, battery storage and a heat pump. Visit energy-stats.uk. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. On to the episode. Hello Alex, thank you for joining me on this episode of Energy Unwrapped. For those that don't know, Alex is co-owner, co-founder, co-creator of Havenwise.
Co-founder.
Co-founder. Okay, I should have researched that before we came on, shouldn't I? It looks very unprofessional. And for those that don't know, Havenwise is a smart controller for heat pumps. I'll set the scene because I've been using Havenwise, so I've got a really good sort of angle on sort of what it does. So heat pumps normally run using weather compensation. And for those that don't know what weather compensation is, the temperature in your radiators rises and falls with the outside temperature. So if it gets cold outside, the water in the radiators gets hotter, and as it gets warmer outside, the water in your radiators cools, because you don't need as much heat in the house. And in a perfect situation, you're trying to match the heat lost to the outside via the heat in your radiators or underfloor. And in a way, that's weather compensation in a nutshell. So that all sounds really, really good. Unfortunately, not all manufacturers' controls are brilliant at it. They make a good stab, some better than others, some are very poor at it. And also the controls themselves are particularly complicated, especially for a homeowner. Homeowners don't want to get into and know what weather curves are and slopes and all sorts of settings that you sort of have to know to set that up correctly. And I suppose that's where Havenwise comes in, to hopefully do a better job of making it easier for the homeowner. Do you think that's a fair summary, Alex?
Yeah, exactly that, Mick. Firstly, great to see you on the other side of our podcast. You're used to the one being invited to them for your extensive knowledge, and I think it makes perfect sense for you now to be running with it and doing your own too. So, thank you for the invite. And good to see you now asking the questions rather than fielding them.
Hopefully we'll get to lots of episodes, so we'll see.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think you summarise it pretty well and where Havenwise comes in. So we very much aim to be, most people know about the hives and the Google nests of years gone past for gas boilers, which their positives for those is they're very easy to use, but that was partly because boilers are typically very easy to use. Heat pumps are not, and so Havenwise really aims to be as easy to use as a hive or a Google Nest, but for a heat pump.
Yeah.
And we aim to abstract away all of what you just talked about setting up weather compensation curves, diving deep into manufacturer menus, changing settings throughout the years and the like on these complex menus. We want to get rid of all of that, and we want an as simple interface as we were used to historically with boilers, but for heat pumps. And we go as far as well as moving into the realms of, well, now energy changes in price, up to every 30 minutes sounds something like Octopus Agile. And we'll consider that too, because that's not really something we ever had to consider before with gas boiler.
Yeah, because gas boilers, very high temperature, well, mainly set up to be very high temperatures coming out of the radiators, and you tell the thermostat you want to be 20 degrees, the boiler kicks in, high heat comes out of the rad until it gets to 20 degrees, and then it switches off. It drops down to 19, it comes back on, and then there's just this continuous cycle. Whereas with a heat pump, you want to just trick. It's like simmering a boil of water, a pan of water. So if you imagine you've brought that pan up to simmer point, and then you just turn it down just enough to maintain. And that's how I like to think about sort of keeping a house at that simmer point. And obviously, as it warms up outside, you don't need as much heat, and as it cools down outside, you need more heat. And that's what heat pump controls try to do, and that's what Havenwise tries to do better than manufacturers' controls. So I suppose taking a step back then, how did Havenwise start? What was the sort of origin story of it all, and how did we get to this point?
Yeah, so Havenwise itself we've been going for about 2 years now. But the origin stories behind a lot of the technology that goes into Havenwise is approaching 5 years in terms of technical maturity. So a bit longer. So on the technical side, a lot of the algorithms and data flows, machine learning we use behind the scenes came about from my final year master's project at university. I'm not as young as that makes out. I might actually be. I was in the army beforehand, had a career as an army officer, left that to go to university, and so I went to university as a so-called mature student, so I was older than everyone else. I was nicknamed Grandad, actually, in the freshers week, believe it or not.
But anyone watching on YouTube will not see you as a granddad. Yeah, I think that's more my realm.
Not yet at least. The hairline's holding on. But so army, university, master's project. And I was very lucky in that master's year in that I had two very talented university lecturers. One was in the space of control algorithms. My degree was in robotics and control engineering. Oxford mathematician, very, very smart guy. Both incredibly smart people. The other one was in building thermodynamics and how buildings heat up and cool down. And so I thought, wouldn't it be a fantastic thing to do to combine what I love about control engineering with the expertise of the one who knew about building thermodynamics and how they heat up and cool down. And so in that master's year, I applied a novel control algorithm to a building in simulation. And that is the origins of a lot of the algorithm we use today at Havenwise and the technical code behind the scenes. Where that then grew is a bit down the line, and meeting Henry, my co-founder, is we met on a program which is for people who are interested in starting a business or a venture. I always describe this to people as sort of like Love Island, but for people who are trying to start a business, right? It's quite
speed dating for business. Speed dating.
yeah, I do genuinely think that if you got a camera out, a bit like Apprentice style, you could have a bit of a, people would watch that. You know, there is as is natural with humans, you get a lot of the who's pairing up, who's teaming up, who isn't teaming up, things like that, and where it might go. But yeah, I met Henry on this program, and we clicked immediately. So Henry has a background in engineering as well. He's an energy engineer by background, but he's very deep in the energy space, the networks, McKinsey consultancy, and the like.
It seems like a perfect match then for you two.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly think so, and I certainly think so. He brings real, genuine knowledge of not just business, technically as well, which is quite rare, I think. It's rare to have both of those attributes. Sometimes you end up with people who are maybe very good at one and not the other. Yeah. But I think he is both. And so we met on that program, and then we realised together that if you applied a lot of the work I'd done previously, technically in my master's year and beyond, and we applied it to the realm of heat pumps, which obviously are growing pretty rapidly, not as fast as probably we'd like in the UK, but they are growing fast. It's a really interesting scenario, and that's how Havenwise came to be.
So I said that I didn't want to get technical, but then I'm really interested in sort of the cloud side of it and who's doing the that side of it, the coding side and the sort of infrastructure side of it. I know there's no infrastructure because it's cloud, but
Yeah. Yeah, good question. So, back here when we first started out, the V0, if you like, of Havenwise was built by myself, but today we have a very, very talented technical team. So there's 4 of us total now in the tech team. And we are the ones who are working on that day to day.
yeah,
We try not to. Henry was actually involved in the first version of the Havenwise app, actually, because when it was just us two and we were trying to go as fast as we could,
yeah,
and essentially bring the product to homeowners and improve things, iterate as fast as we could. But today we try and keep him away from that.
sacked him off, sacked him as a coder, get off. No, well, if his skill set is better suited somewhere else, then that's probably best.
How I always look at these things is we want Havenwise and we want the company to be the best as it possibly can be, right? And it's not enough, I think, in these circumstances, and I've always approached teams and the like, even when I was in the army, to just be good, because there's lots of people who are good at things. You need people who are exceptional in their spaces. And so while someone can be good, Henry has exceptional expertise across other parts of the business. The technical team we have now are exceptional in what they do day to day, and so it makes total sense to divide and conquer that way.
So as I said, it's a cloud-based thing for the homeowner. What does that mean to them? There's no kit to buy. It's basically, if your heat pump is already internet connected via its own app, then it's available. But it's only at the moment. It's only a certain set of manufacturers that you can talk to.
Correct. Yeah. So we aim to be a software-only solution. So if your heat pump is already internet connected, say on a Vaillant, like your own via the My Vaillant app, and we can use the same connection to connect to the heat pump because it's already connected to the internet, and that's how Havenwise will interface with it. There are so you mentioned certain brands, so today we're compatible with Vaillant, Mitsubishi and Samsung, and we are rolling out Daikin as we speak, so that's a very recent
big
addition.
announcement, podcast big announcement, Daikin is coming.
Absolutely.
Is it Daikin? Is it Daikin or Daikin? I never know.
You know what, we hear different things from different people.
Vaillant's a lot easier. I'm all right with Vaillant. So,
but yeah, for anyone who wants to get on the beta program for that, it's a case of signing up via the Havenwise app and joining the waitlist.
Wow. But fundamentally, the model doesn't change. It's just the way you need to talk to each of the manufacturers, because each of the manufacturers will have a different way of setting the flow temperature or setting the hot water, doing various things. In essence, you're creating a sort of mapping of what you want to do against how the manufacturer needs to be asked to do that.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. It's challenging interfacing with hardware generally and with heat pumps especially because they're so complicated.
Yeah.
Even within a single heat pump brand, whereby we connect over the internet, there's something called an API. Even within a single brand, you get quite a lot of variation actually.
Yeah.
And sending a flow temperature command or a hot water temperature command on one brand can be completely different to how another brand reports and interacts with it.
So really, the model is probably almost complete, and it's just that interfacing, which is why other brands will come along later. But there's work required from yourselves to do that, and I imagine there's a work versus reward. If there's a heat pump that's got a very small user base, then is it worth it at this stage to put a lot of your effort into that? It makes sense that you've gone with the sort of big ones first?
Yeah, so we constantly review the roadmap. So we always have a number of candidates for the next integration. The best thing we can always say to people to do, if they're interested in influencing that, is again signing up via the app, joining the waitlist, and critically, when you join the waitlist, share the brand you're on, because that goes
Right.
directly to
So
their
even
analytics.
if for homeowners that have got a heat pump that's not currently on the Havenwise list, if you sign up or join the waiting list, or even just get in contact and say, when's my X brand coming, then it gives you some influence and sort of idea of what to target next.
Exactly that. Exactly.
If you sit on your hands and don't say anything, how do they know? So the model that you created then, that was just sort of in software, that was not running a heat pump. It was just science, really, just a maths problem, I imagine.
Yes and no. So fundamentally, it does boil down to maths. I think what a flippant response would be, everything boils down to maths, but
Yeah.
no, that's quite a flippant response. We do build a thermal model of the home and of the heat pump, which will be tailor-made for each person's home.
Right, yeah, because I
That's
remember
why we have a learning phase.
I remember when I signed up, it said there was a learning phase, and
Exactly.
and I imagined that was trying to work out how quickly the home heated and how quickly the home lost heat, depending on the outside temperature and any other variables that you're tracking at that time.
Yeah, exactly that. So, two sides in the model. There's the home and there's the heat pump, and we divide it as such because actually a home heats up and cools down regardless of what the energy source is. You could put a wood burner in it, you could put a gas boiler in it.
Yeah.
The walls are the walls, the thermal mass is the thermal mass. That is unchanging ultimately, unless you start opening windows or doors or the like, in which case you do start creating a dynamic system. So you have the home side of it, and then you have the heat pump side of it, which again, that is something that can be modelled. Every heat pump is slightly different, and how it interacts with the home is different, flow rates, etc., etc. So that can be modelled together as well. You put those together, and then you have how the heating system interacts. And once you know roughly how the heating system interacts, you can make predictions based off that. A bit like I sometimes compare it to a sat-nav, in that you know where you want to be in, say, on your journey. In this case, probably warm with the lowest bills possible with the heat pump. And how do you get there in the fastest time possible with a sat-nav, with a heat pump, the cheapest way possible.
Yeah.
And so we can look ahead at that journey in the next 24 hours and plot that path, because we know how the home heats up and cools down in tandem with that heat
And
pump.
you also know what the homeowner wants from their
Exactly,
schedule.
which is critical. So from day one, we organised from a principle that the homeowner, what they want in terms of comfort, should always come first. Always come first. Even if that means we have to, say, heat at a time that is less than desirable in terms of a tariff or the weather, then we would rather do that and keep the homeowner comfortable, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. One cold shower is enough to put anyone off, I think. I think smart control.
In a way, that's one of the things I've found really good with Havenwise compared to the Vaillant controls. And don't get me wrong, the Vaillant controls are one of the better ones out there. But
Definitely.
when you come off a setback overnight and you've done the hot water overnight and the home has cooled down, the Vaillant controls are really sort of not very aggressive at getting you. Say you want to be 20 degrees by 7:30 a.m. when you all get up. The Vaillant controls really aren't aggressive to get you back to that target temperature. Whereas Havenwise has no problem in ramping the flow temperature up to get you where you've asked it to be, and that's probably the standout comfort feature for me with Havenwise versus the Vaillant is that willingness to give the radiators a little bit more when required just to get you where you want to be.
It's good to hear that. So we intentionally design it that way, to the point where we do occasionally get some. It tends to be the more technical minded, the people who want to fine tune, try and get as close to perfect performance as possible. They often say, "Well, I'd rather it's a little bit lower flow temperature and the like." But harking back to my initial opening, we really want to be as easy to use as the hive and the nest was and for a boiler.
Yeah.
And for most people, that means kind of setting up a temperature and forgetting about it. Essentially, they just want to be warm in the cheapest way possible. And so we do.
Anyone who's not experienced sort of weather compensated heating controls, it's off the chart sort of comfort wise. It's crazy. Like this morning we came downstairs, it was 20 degrees down in the dining room, and I have to look at my phone to see what temperature it is outside, because you just lose all concept of what it is outside, because the system is adapting all the time to the outside temperature. So just to put the right amount of heat in the radiators or the underfloor. Like this morning it was like 1.2 degrees, and like I was looking out the window going, I might have to put a coat on, or like, it could have been 8 degrees and it's still 20 degrees inside, because the system is constantly adapting. It's if you've not yet experienced weather compensated controls, it's amazing. It's sort of one of the selling points that you can't. It's really hard to describe or to sell to somebody without having experienced it yourself.
Yeah, a very steady level of comfort.
Yeah, ultimately that's what you're trying to do.
I often think and this is quite, I guess, could be quite controversial, because you do get bad heat pump installs which result in people being in cold and high bills, unfortunately, too regularly. But I believe that with a well-installed heat pump, the biggest problem is being too warm. And people quite often are caught out by this or don't expect it, because with a boiler and how we're used to, and particularly in the UK, it's you want to be warm, heat on, you want to be cold, you turn it off, and it's pretty much that simple in terms of getting the cheapest thing out of your heating. But a heat pump, it really isn't that simple. If you want to be warm in a day's time, it almost certainly is true to be heating to some degree right now. It varies a lot with conditions and the like. But this is why the concept of how much do I set back my heating overnight when I'm in bed, what is the optimum amount? And actually the constraint is usually being too warm. And that we are used to turning off the heating at night with a boiler and then turning it back on in the morning, and you get a nice cool bedroom as a result of that. Well, with a heat pump, that costs more money to do that. So
it's finding that balance, isn't it? And I know there's also, on the heating side, you are, Havenwise is always talking can talk to energy tariffs. So if you want to, you can preload the house on cheap periods, and you can sort of coast through more expensive periods. Personally, I'm not for that. I'd rather spend a few more pennies and have a constant 20 degrees or whatever we've chosen. But Havenwise can do that for those that are willing to trade that tiny bit of comfort for potentially some energy saving, some cost saving.
Yeah. So on normal operation, or say if someone has a flat tariff, we operate like a predictive weather compensation curve, essentially, but with many more data parameters that go into that calculation, from the benefit of being able to look 24 hours into the future and make decisions based off of that now. When someone is on a varying tariff, we can then adjust that up or down, and it's not as simple as being on-off, which I think is sometimes what the marketing and some of the analysis around time of use tariffs with heat pumps does. They suggest, well, you're on in this period, you're off in that period, but heat pumps are so sensitive in terms of the efficiency and therefore the cost they operate at, depending on the flow temperature, that it may well be that, okay, your tariff has dropped by a certain amount, therefore you turn up the heat pump a certain amount, and now your tariff is more expensive. Maybe the optimal thing isn't turning off, it's turning down. So instead of doing a 30-degree flow temperature, which is a certain cost, you do a 25-degree one or another.
Just you keep feeding the house. And I think going back to that point when we were talking about sort of feed, you're not just feeding the air, the bricks, the mortar, all absorb that heat. So by constantly feeding it, you sort of get that heat just stays there. So if you just chop it and stop, everything cools down, then everything has to heat back up. So what you're saying is it's probably better just to constantly feed it something rather than nothing.
It can be, yeah. It's very unique to the home, very unique to the home, very unique to the tariff, and also unique to the homeowners or home dwellers' preferences.
Yeah.
Some people are more or less sensitive to heat, and people find different levels of comfort.
Yeah.
Are better for.
I've got this is my 4th winter with the heat pump, and I can notice now if like it changes by 0.2 degrees or something. Got so attuned to how it feels. But I suppose and one other thing that I've found that Havenwise does well, while we're on the does well things, is if you set up your schedule so that when you're out at work, you sort of have it not off, but like a setback. A bit like the overnight scenario, the Vaillant would struggle to get you back to 20 degrees by 4 p.m. or whatever you wanted. But again, Havenwise, because it can be a little bit more aggressive in getting you back, and it does the calculations, you can set your schedule up to be, well, I want it warm in the morning, I don't care in the day because everyone's at school or work or whatever, and then I want it warm again in the evening. And Havenwise, I assume, is doing the cost analysis in the background to work out what's best for that particular day, or because it might be a different decision if it's 2 degrees outside versus if it's 9 degrees outside and you're getting a copper 5 or something.
Yeah, exactly that. One thing we often see is you're right with the changing conditions, is as the weather gets cooler and also as a property gets less well insulated, because they're very similar in terms of how they transpire in a home. As the weather gets cooler, then a larger setback becomes cheaper, because the home will cool down far faster. When the home is cooler, it loses energy slower, and if it loses energy slower, then your bathtub, as it were, a metaphorical bathtub, is emptying slower. Whereas in a better insulated home or on a warmer night, you can heat now, and a lot of that heat will still be there in a few hours' time. And therefore, if you heat now at a lower flow temperature, because you're just topping it up, and that is cheaper overall. So it is really, really complicated depending on the conditions, the preferences, the home's properties, on what is optimal for that particular day. And you can see some really varying performance. And it's not always intuitive either. I think that's one of the things we want to bridge at Havenwise, is making things explainable. Like, why was this the best decision to do? Because I think it's very rarely, or it's certainly not common, for that to be completely intuitive because of how complex the underlying physics are.
Yeah. You've got a windy day, you've got solar gain, you've got all these extra things going on that the manufacturer's controls don't know about and sort of don't react to, and it's just the amount of data points I think that you're monitoring and making decisions based on, which is more than the manufacturer's controls are, that sort of makes your product that extra layer and adds value to.
Yeah, you don't want to become a heating engineer just to control your heating.
No, you just want, I want it 20 degrees here and I'm at work and I don't care then. And so I want it comfortable and I want it as cheap as possible. And that's exactly that's what we're after. So we've talked about the heating side. But Havenwise also can make similar decisions about hot water. Now, I'll be honest, I don't use Havenwise for the hot water because I've got a mixergy cylinder and I've got. I just do mine twice a day because I've analysed my hot water requirements to the nth degree, and I know that 2 full cylinders at 45 degrees will get me through morning showers, evening showers, and that's it. I've sort of done the brain box bit behind my water. But for somebody who hasn't, then Havenwise can also make similar decisions to heating, but around hot water. So time of use tariffs, and sort of temperatures. But ultimately, the number one thing is the homeowner wants hot water when they want it.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's how we ask people to set things up in the app. So it's, when will you need the tank to be at the temperature that you've set in the app for? And we will ensure it's near that temperature with around a dead band called a hysteresis band.
Yeah.
Around that temperature for that time. That could mean heating quite a bit in advance, even on a flat tariff, because of how much impact the weather can make. So HeatGeek have some good resources on this, but generally if you're on a flat tariff, then if you can get away with one cycle during the day, or if you only need one cycle, the best time for that's probably going to be about 1 p.m. Just because on average that's when it's warmest. Not always, it varies with conditions, but that's how much impact the outdoor conditions have. But that can be quite
enough, there is an article on my website all about these little advantages called the golden rules. So yeah, there's the outside temperature can affect it. There's the target temperature that can affect it, that gets you better cop. There's how empty is your cylinder before you start the reheat. The emptier, the better efficiency. And there's a fourth one that I can't remember, so that's stupid, isn't it? But if you read the article, which I'll link in the show notes, then you'll be able to see what it is. But yeah, there's again, just like heating, there's lots of different ways to make things more efficient and to do things in a different way. And you're abstracting all that complexity away from the homeowner and sort of taking that all into account to get the hot water that they want when they want it, but be at the cheapest price possible.
Yeah, exactly that. It's a different challenge. I mean, even without something like Havenwise, owning a heat pump and then having a cylinder back in your home. I actually grew up with one, so I was quite used to the boiler firing away a system boiler.
I'd never had a cylinder, so
before
I'd had a combi boiler.
Right?
Yeah, so for the last 20 years, I just turned a hot tap on and hot water came out.
And you had hot water, always, right? 100%
always, and like almost limitless. Well, it is limitless.
Yep.
And when it was 2p a kilowatt hour of gas a decade ago, who cared? But moving to a cylinder where it's now a finite amount of water, and you can see the cost of that. It's definitely a different mindset.
And that's the ease of use with that came with a combi boiler. Those were the pros, and that is what people are used to having. You know, you open the hot water tap, you have hot water. You're too cold in the home, or you've woken up and it was a colder morning. You turn a dial and you forget about it, and you'll be warm probably within an hour or so, and you'll certainly feel the radiators because they'll get really hot. So it's very responsive and it's very tangible. You take an action and something happens. I often compare it to a speedboat on the sea. It's very nimble. If you go the wrong way, you can very quickly turn and change direction.
Yeah.
With a heat pump, it's like steering a cruise ship.
It is.
And if you haven't heated up your hot water cylinder, well, you're going to have to wait half an hour before your hot water cycle to kick in if you haven't got that right. If you're too cold
on a smaller heat pump, it could take even longer.
Yeah, exactly that. And if you're too cold now in terms of heating and you want to be warm, well, you can heat yourself up pretty quickly these days with the modern type of heat pumps. They go to high temperatures. It can be done. but you will invariably be spending so much more than if it had just been trickling along in the background. So
Yeah.
that's heat pumps is all about making small, continuous changes, looking far ahead into what's coming, and then avoiding the obstacles which are coming.
Yeah.
When this comes and when you need
Heat,
hot water and heating.
heat pumps are way better at maintaining a temperature than trying to get to a temperature.
Yes.
That's one way I think of it. Sort of, they're good at trickling. They're good at that simmer. They're good. I find that's so they're the complete opposite to how most gas boilers are installed. So I think
Exactly.
this is why we've got this sort of homeowner education piece to think about when people move, because it's a heat source, but you just have to control it and what's the word, sort of just accept those differences, be all right with the differences. So I
Yeah,
suppose
this
in
is
the hot
one thing
water,
your site does excellently, is the education side of things. So
I try.
articles and explanations around what's happening with the system and the like. There's absolutely a gap, a knowledge and experience gap that needs to be bridged to use heat pumps.
Yeah, I suppose the hot water is probably the easiest thing to shift around, as long as you can
Hot
hit
water is
the
an interesting one. It certainly is the easiest to shift around. Tanks these days generally are so well insulated that you can't ignore passive losses, but they become an order of magnitude less impactful than say
Yeah.
even outdoor temperature, and certainly tariff in terms of
Yeah.
moving around to do the cheapest thing. But it's the highest impact to get wrong, and it's the least predictable in terms of when that usage will occur. Because how can any system predict that you had a long run today and you took your shower 30 minutes early because you got a work meeting that's earlier than normal?
Yeah.
No system can predict that, but your system can generally predict the insulation levels of the home and what
Yeah.
the temperatures will be and the like.
Or in my house, a 13-year-old who likes to stand there for 20 minutes just not doing anything. Yeah.
Exactly right. These all make hot water it's quite easy to get hot water wrong, I think. And when you get hot water wrong, it's a very negative experience because you stand in a cold shower. And
Yeah.
I hate cold water. There's a bit of a trend and wellness thing, which I mean, when I've done it, I
Not
feel
for me.
excellent in
None
cold
of that
showers. But
outdoor
yeah, it's
swimming
not
thing.
for me at all.
No. Just going back to that article on the golden rules that I wrote, the number one thing that came out of that is that from a cost point of view, moving hot water to an off-peak time will always be cheaper than chasing any sort of COP improvements. The COP improvements are tiny little sort of reductions in cost, but just moving it wholesale to a cheaper period is just cheaper, full stop. Even if you
Yeah.
get a crap COP.
Yeah, I mean the best example of this is people on EV tariffs, where you have a pretty wild swing. It's 4x almost always.
Yeah.
So usually about 7 pence overnight to say 28 pence during the day. And so to run your heat pump during the peak tariff period instead of the off-peak tariff period, it'd have to be 4 times more efficient.
Exactly.
And that multiplier is just not possible, really.
No.
In any condition, you'd have to have an incredibly wide outdoor temperature swing
Yeah.
for that.
But even the tariffs like Cozy that have got designated like 3 dips through the day, if you can shift your hot water into them, you're going to be saving. So this is where the time of use tariff optimization comes in. It's just, if I remember rightly on the app, it's just a tick box. Do you want to do tariff optimization? Yes, and then Havenwise goes away. It goes and tries to do that for you.
Exactly that. It's enabled by default, but during onboarding and also in the settings page, you can swap to flat optimization, which some people will prefer, even if you're on a time use tariff like Cozy or an EV tariff or even Agile. If you have, say, batteries, then it may be that you would prefer to still
Absolutely,
swap.
yes. That's I do that. I don't have any optimization on at all, but I've got batteries, so I'll happily take the comfort because I've used the time of use tariff to sort of store the energy in the battery to then use by the heat pump rather than try to use the house as a bit of a store.
Yeah. We do envisage a world one day, I mean that world is already here in many respects, but it's pretty rare, where depending on the combination of the homeowners import tariff, export tariff, say they have battery, solar, EV, and maybe one day we'll have vehicle to grid, but that's probably much further away, and heat pump. And then if you look at that system holistically, then you can begin trading essentially on the energy markets with all of those assets and moving it around.
Yeah.
That might still be beneficial from a financial point of view to shift the heat pump even with a battery, because on your export tariff you can react to a grid flexibility event at a certain time, and make some money.
This is why I think I've got plenty of podcast episodes to come, because there's so much stuff to unpack in all that. It's going to be crazy. So just going back to the control then of Havenwise, if you have your long run and your meeting changes, or my 13-year-old canes all the hot water, or you were unexpectedly at home and you want to bump the heating up, then you can override any existing schedules in the app and just press a button and say, do this now.
Yeah, we have boosts and override buttons in the app for exactly that purpose. Schedules can also be edited, but that tends to be the longer term thing to do. Boosting is the way to go there. Again, with the caveat that if your tank is empty, then you can press a boost button on a heat pump. This is regardless if it's Havenwise or not, but you need to wait for it to start up and actually heat up the tank. So I think is often is the cause of confusion for people with hot water, and that they think the heat pump can maintain it, and they just can't. Unless you've got a really big heat pump, then it's not really capable of maintaining.
You can't create instantaneous water. It has to heat the water.
The combi in my flat here is 24 kilowatts, I think. Which how many 24 kilowatt heat pumps do you find?
Not many. And obviously there's things like holiday modes and all the things you'd expect from the likes of Hive and Nest, and all those things have been thought about, so you don't have to. It's almost like a one-stop shop. You shouldn't have to dive into the manufacturer's controls once you've started using Havenwise.
Exactly.
Okay, so what if I come to you and my system isn't performing well, and I join Havenwise? Can it fix a crap system?
It's a great question.
And I imagine you get lots of people joining and going, well, my system's rubbish, fix it please.
We can get the best out of a system, but ultimately we can't make physical changes.
No.
So what this, we have quite an interesting example of this. One of our very first users was a Mitsubishi user, family of 5, in the Leighton Buzzard kind of area. And their hot water bill, their whole heat pump bill, but particularly that hot water bill, was massive. It was in like £2,000. It was incredibly large, because they had a poorly installed system, which was also being controlled very poorly. And so what you end up with is that the worse the system is performing in terms of COP, so they were getting like sub 2 COP, sometimes 1.5 on the hot water. The worse it's performing, the more you have to benefit from, say, moving around consumption for time of use tariffs, or even for the outdoor conditions, or even just avoiding, like in your hot water cylinder guides, just avoiding. The cheapest cycle is an overcycle.
Yeah.
And the savings we realise for that individual by optimising their system, despite it is factually a really badly installed system, it was astronomical, because it was previously reheating frequently to 55. He was trying to boost it so everyone could get a shower when they came back from Wales, as you'd want to do as a family. It was operating in the peak periods, or they had a flat tariff previously. If you just get rid of all those considerations and just heat the thing when it's in the cheapest moments and when you need the hot water on a time use tariff, and the savings that can be realised then were pretty massive.
Yeah. I think I put in my review, because I wrote a review about Havenwise on the site, and I think one of the subsections was, you can't polish a turd. And if the system is fundamentally flawed, bad install, bad wrong size pipe work. It's not getting flow rates. It's just a bad install. Then no amount of fancy controls are going to be able to fix that. That needs addressing by a competent installer, and unfortunately, we do see a lot of those type of installs. But I suppose by installing Havenwise, even on a bad installation, that can surface and sort of potentially highlight issues. Like, so you'll be reading like flow rates and flow temperatures and lots of metrics from within the system itself. You'll be able to pull out the performance figures, and you'll be able to maybe advise the homeowner maybe what's wrong, or to at least evidence what is happening that they can then take to somebody else to try and fix.
Exactly that. If on Havenwise your system is still performing poorly in terms of overall cost or other performance metrics, like you say, you can look at the flow rate and other things, then that is pretty good evidence, I'd say, in that there might need to be another change. Sometimes it's not necessarily cost beneficial to do so, but often it might be.
Yeah.
It certainly can give evidence to take to an installer, or certainly for your peace of mind that something is wrong or could be changed. Like I said, we always think that if you connect Havenwise up to even a poorly installed heat pump, Havenwise will get as good a performance as it can out of that system.
Yeah.
And if that still isn't good enough, then that's when to go back to an installer potentially, or a resolution service. So,
is there anyone that Havenwise isn't for? Let's turn it around. Like I was skeptical right at the start, and I wasn't convinced I was the right person for Havenwise, because, as you know, we'd had conversations before, and I tuned my system to the nth degree over sort of 3 winters. So, is there anyone out there that probably doesn't need Havenwise?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, I said earlier that no one wants to be a heating engineer to run your heating. That isn't fully true. I think some people do want to be heating engineers, particularly among the early
people in the forum, the help forums, and the sort of communities that I frequent. That they are already heating engineers without them knowing.
Yeah, exactly. Because it is a novel experience. It's new technology. We're at the leading edge of it. So I understand. Absolutely. I mean, we are ourselves, right? I completely understand why people are interested in that. And ultimately, for those individuals, they often like to spin up home assistant integrations and things like that. Maybe they'd prefer having the fine-grained control of the system day to day, which
almost
we
like
completely respect.
they're in control rather than handing it over to somebody else.
Yeah, certainly in the day-to-day, defines what exactly is the flow temperature it's running. We always say, even with Havenwise, you are still in control, right? You can turn it on, you can turn it off, you can change the schedules. It's more that we are acting as almost like a cruise control for it, like another layer. For someone who's into the home assistant integrations, or really babysitting the system and eking out every little bit out of it, nothing can beat in most situations in life, to be honest, a human just sat next to it 24/7 tweaking it, right?
Yeah, watching 30-minute time slots on Agile saying boost now, or
exactly.
But on the flip side, then the person who it definitely is for is the person who doesn't want to be looking at time slots on time of use tariffs and doesn't care about outside temperatures and whatever. It's just fire and forget.
Exactly. Yeah. Simplicity, usability, user friendliness. We are adding in further dashboards internally that we may or may not open up at some stage for people to look at, so they can see some of this data and analyze it and the like. But ultimately, that isn't the target audience. The target audience.
What about installers, Alex? Is there some benefit to installers?
Absolutely. So most installers will know the amount of questions that they field on control settings, callbacks, and the like, or someone who has been cold, thought, okay, I need to change the setting on my heat pump. They try to change it, and then they're like colder still or too warm, and now you get the call as the installer to fix it.
Yeah.
And unless you have, I mean, best case scenario is you're already fielding a call, so you're no longer installing systems, you are fielding a support call. And best case scenario then is you can remotely access the data and then remotely fix that issue. That's not always necessarily possible, and then the reality is the homeowner's none the wiser in actually making a change again in the future if they have to, if they are too cold or too warm. Benefits of Havenwise is because it's a far simpler user experience. When they're cold, it's very clear what to do to get warm again. You know, you can change your schedule or you can boost. There's no heat curve, there's no weather compensation, no hysteresis settings, none of anything like that. It's all automated. And the installers as well, they get the dashboard and visibility onto all of these data points and system performance and the like for
Is that for their installs? So if they've got 5 installs that are using Havenwise, they can see them in their own control panel.
Exactly that. They can see historical performance, both cost, COP. They can see more fine-grained metrics depending on brand, such as flow temperature, pressure. Also things like error codes, again, depending on brand, are exposed, which is pretty useful because you get on many brands, you get error codes which the heat pump will stop working, and actually all it needs is to be turned off and on again. It just needs power cycling, and that's fixed. And installers sometimes end up travelling hours just to turn something off and on.
Yeah, because a lot of the good installers that sort of I know are not averse to travelling a long way to fit a heat pump on a really nice, interesting project. But then a week later they get a call and like, oh, do I really need that 4-hour round trip to go and change a curve or whatever? And I suppose if Havenwise can do that, sort of, do it remotely and you not have to sort of go visiting to site, that's a big boon for an installer, I suppose.
And also the homeowner, if it gets the homeowner back warm, or if there's the best thing is to have no problem in the first place, which we will mitigate. But then if there is a problem, can it be resolved super fast remotely?
And can it also sort of be used for commissioning from an installer's point of view? So obviously the installer will have an idea that to set, like in a non-Havenwise system on a Vaillant, it might be that you've designed the system for 40 degrees at -3, so you know it's 0.5 on the curve and you know what settings to set. But with Havenwise you could just install, press start, and then within a few days it's sort of learnt the property and has worked it out for itself.
Yeah, exactly that. And even immediately we use a baseline curve, so it's improving from minute 0.
How long, just go back to that learning curve then, Alex, how long is that learning curve, and does it continually learn? So my system's I think it's 10 months I've had Havenwise. Is it still learning about mine?
It will check in. It checks in on the quality. So is it still passing a quality threshold in terms of how the data is marrying up to what we expect it to do? And this is why the learning period will vary depending on home. So it's average 24 to 48 hours, I would say. But you do get some that stretch out a few days longer because it just hasn't met the quality line that we define internally for that data. And yes, on the commissioning side of things, it can be as simple as fit Havenwise, and then there's so much data with these systems, and a lot of the settings that are set up, ultimately it's like, well, why can't it tell that itself? Why doesn't it know the tank is this big? Why doesn't it know that the maximum flow temperature limit should be this big because there's underfloor heating? Can't it put 2 and 2 together with the flow rate being this, and therefore this setting should be that? Why can't it deduce from how quickly the home's cooling down what the heat curve and weather compensation style settings should be? All of that, the data is there, the information is there, it's just not fused together and used in a useful way.
Because I suppose on a manufacturer's control, the brains, the logic of the system is just in the little box. It's not, it's just some if this, do that, based on an outside temperature and an indoor temperature. It's very simple, almost very simple logic. Whereas you've got a model running in the cloud, constantly analysing all these data points. So that's why the manufacturer's controls are as basic as they are, because you need cloud computing and you need some brains to be making more decisions.
What I see as an ideal, if I was like to look ahead and see what would be like the best possible heat pump in 5 to 10 years time, is something you can fit and forget essentially. So it goes in terms of installation, you fit the wall controller and the like, and maybe it has some basic default logic on it, but it connects to a edge or cloud system that with more powerful resources, which will then essentially synchronize a plan for that heat pump. And that means you have the benefits of far larger compute resources and computer power. The ability of the benefit of software is it's continuously improving. So the benefit of Havenwise is, we ship up many updates every single day behind the scenes to the back end, which improves it over time. Whereas once
which is stark contrast to my Vaillant. The software on that board can't be updated. You have to replace the board.
Yeah,
Which I found out to my cost, which is crazy in this day and age. So so Havenwise is constantly, every time I open the app it says reload because there's been an update and stuff. So that's the beauty. That's the beauty of a cloud product rather than a sort of any other static device. You can make changes and pull out changes if something goes wrong, and which you shouldn't go wrong, should it?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're at the point now in the world where we have ChatGPT and all these other tools running in massive cloud data centers that are being built at an incredible pace. Incredible technology, but requires a lot of computing power. I mean, it's incredible what it does, and yet you have heat pumps that go in and they don't even know that what the heat curves would be, which is quite bizarre really when you think about what's happening in one sphere and what's happening in another sphere. And the reality is like the heat loss calculations have been done. They're measuring all this data. It just needs to be used in the correct way.
So one homeowner question then is, if it's reliant on cloud and what happens if the internet goes down in the home? What you're left with then, and even if it's a day or two, what happens with the heat pump then?
Yeah, it's a good question. Today you'll have control exactly how you would have had pre-Havenwise. So you'll be able to go up to your physical controller and use the controller exactly as you had before, if it is a long downtime in terms of internet or the like. So we sometimes get asked about power cuts. The thing is, with power cuts, the heat pump's not working anyway.
Yes.
And we also feel that people often mention this about gas boilers too, and that gas boilers immune to power cut.
It's got a pump in it. It's got a logic board. Last time I checked, they don't run on gas. So what's the future hold for Havenwise over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, great question. Brand expansion. So obviously we have the Daikin beta right now, which is expanding. Please do join the waitlist for that, and we aim to open it up to anyone being able to sign up on the app in the next few weeks. We'd like to add new brand support, of course. The more brands we support, the more heat pumps we can, and homeowners we can make their lives better, we hope and we think. And we want to keep adding to the core product, so expanding the stats that are available, ease of use, reliability, robustness, even just how it looks, continuing to modernising that. We want to improve all of these aspects with the app and Havenwise.
Brilliant. Well, I'd say I've been on it 10 months and I'll be carrying on with it. If anyone wants to give it a try, there's the month's free trial still there.
Absolutely, yeah. 1 month free trial.
Brill. And then, well, it's sort of no cost. Give it a go, and if you don't like it, walk away. You can't say fairer than that, can you? Really?
We like to think so, at least. We like to think
I'll
so.
put a link in the show notes to the where you can find more about the trial and how to sign up. But it's been a brilliant conversation, Alex. I've really enjoyed it. Might get you back on again, and we can get even geekier into how it works, because I know we've had conversations about the underpinnings of the Vaillant and Energy Integral, and we've really gone into the weeds with it. So, but I've saved the listener from that this time. So,
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Mick. And yeah, I hope we haven't gone too deep in
hopefully,
certain
well,
areas.
if anyone thinks we have, please tell us in the comments on the YouTube video. And something I do keep forgetting is to like and subscribe. Apparently, that's what the YouTubers all say. So I've got to do that. So.
When are you starting your TikTok, Mick?
Oh God, no! God, I think I'm the wrong side of a certain age to be TikToking. I think. Thanks a
Got a
lot,
little mark
Alex, and
going for the
I'll
heat
see you soon.
pump. Cheers, Mick.
Thanks
Take
very
care
much.
now.
See you later.
See ya.